get the recording turned on? All right, I'll call this meeting to order. It's the Community and Economic Development Committee meeting. And today is Thursday, January 19th. And we'll start out with introductions. I'm the chair, Pete Peterson.
Kevin Cross, Felix Rivera,
Joey Sweet.
And on the phone, Mr. Sweet.
Randy Solt.
Mr. Solt. Thank you. Okay. The first thing under unfinished business is an update on AO 2021-88. And Dean did not get a chance to work on this in the last couple of weeks here. He's been a little busy with other items right now. So he's going to be working on that hopefully by the time we get to our next meeting. Oh, by the way, we probably need to add something to our agenda.
Yeah, do we have any amendments to the agenda?
Let's do that now. You,
Sure.
You and Mr. Solt had an item on our agenda coming up.
Oh, do we?
I think so.
I have a lot of items.
Is that 2023-12? I'm trying to go.
Hold on just one second. How many more specifics?
That's the subcommittee. We put a subcommittee together, you and Mr. Solt, the last time.
So regarding any of our committees, all those are kind of getting pushed out right now because with the housing summit coming up. And so the intention is rather than piecemeal little particular items, trying to do one comprehensive work session where we can cover a multitude of topics in one go. This would be beneficial for the expedience of time, get everybody in the room and address a handful of topics. So yes, we had put together a request for a work session roundtable regarding, there's a laundry list of items in there, but I do know that Claire and the Assembly assistants have been working on one large work session where we address a multitude of items. And I should probably just ask Claire if she's identified specific dates and times on that. But it's, considering all the different things we have going on, it's kind of been like herding cats. So.
All right. Okay.
And we can ask Randy if Randy had anything else he wanted to add. I know that we were talking about the triplexes, the fourplexes, the different code requirements. Randy, was there anything else specific that we wanted to make sure we covered on that upcoming housing summit?
Yeah, nothing comes to mind at the moment.
Yeah, it's a long list. We've had that document, a 2-page document we've been
Right.
going on for a while. We've actually chiseled away quite a bit of that the last 6 months. So a lot of the continuation as well as some other items have been picked up. But no further work session scheduled. Again, the intention is to handle a multitude of these items in one work session that will take place during the housing summit.
All right, great. Okay, well, let's go down to our item B under unfinished business, industrial hemp. And Janet, do you have some information for us?
Sure. I didn't make a bunch of copies. I want to make like 5 copies. I don't know.
If you give me one, I can get
Okay.
it sent out too.
So, hi, I'm Jana, for folks that don't know me. And I represent a lot of the marijuana industry. And we've kind of had this issue come up lately where, wait. Oh, this one's my copy. Actually, I'm not sure how many copies I have. Maybe Mandy, you could drop off a bunch of those, a few of those. We've had this issue come up lately where, oh, thank you. And I raised this back in I don't know, almost a year ago. Okay, thank you.
Brian, can you scan it to me too and I'll put it on the website?
Yes.
I don't know, this is a weird configuration. Do you want me to go somewhere else or just, I'm like,
Sure. Maybe Steelworkings.
okay, I'm
Tomatoes.
sorry. I haven't been here for a while. I feel like this is such a different configuration. So I think it was back in early 2022, I raised this issue that I was seeing in smoke shops, Delta 9 from hemp gummies that were 300 milligrams of THC in a container. And so hemp has this weird loophole with the federal government where if on a dry weight basis, it's less than 0.03% THC, then it's legal. Well, of course, people are really entrepreneurial and come up with a bunch of workarounds. And so what a lot of people have done is they've kind of concentrated the THC that they derive from hemp. And there's two ways to kind of create this, so I'll just do the easy way first. They concentrate it by gathering up waste product from hemp. So like what they would do is extract hemp, organize the molecules that are CBD, which are typically non-intoxicating, and then the other THC molecules they kind of put in a barrel, and that's supposed to be waste. And so DEA says you can't use hemp waste unless you get a permit, right? But DEA has been very non-enforcing on this issue. And so people were gathering up this THC from hemp, which is, you know, a fraction of the cost to create. Also, it doesn't have all the regulatory requirements that we have, like tracking every plant, testing every plant. In Alaska, we've got really good testing requirements for hemp, but in other states you don't. And also in other countries you don't. And then, you know, gathering it up, and then taking these THC molecules and putting them into gummies or chocolate bars or some other kind of edible and creating really high potency THC gummies that when you weigh it, and this is the silliest argument, but it passed our Division of Ag, and it's passed other divisions of Ag, and I've strongly voiced my opposition to this legal analysis, where if you take the THC molecules and you put them into a gummy, and then you weigh the gummy, if the THC molecules weigh less than 0.03% of the entire weight of the gummy, so the sugar, the water, the gelatin, then they consider it a non-intoxicating hemp product, despite the fact that that gummy can have 300 milligrams of THC in it and still pass that weight test, depending on the size of the gummy. So it makes, thank you so much. So it makes really no sense. So what we've seen into our market is this flood of these THC Delta 9 from hemp gummies that I raised to your Treasury Department, hey guys, you're not taxing these. So you are allowing these products to be sold that are equal or greater than the THC that my clients are selling, that are licensed and taxed and regulated and tested. What are we going to do about it? And you know, it's complicated, so they didn't really get too excited about it like I thought maybe folks would. And then the other way to create these Delta 9s or Delta 10s or Delta 11s or Delta JDOs is a synthetic process, kind of like spice. So the other way to do it is to take CBD or CBN, chemically synthesize it, and create these novel, they call it novel cannabinoids. So we let Governor Dunleavy know about it. He definitely took interest and said, okay, you guys gotta tell me what to do about this because this is very concerning, right? And I'm paraphrasing, that's not his exact words, but he formed the Governor's Advisory Task Force. I'm a co-chair of it. We came up with a task force report, which I meant to bring you guys copies of. I sent copies to Mr. Peterson, and I'll send copies to Mandy to distribute. But basically he asked us, you know, 3 things. What are we gonna do about these deltas and novel deltas from hemp? What tax reform do you need? Because, you know, the industry is getting taxed to death. And is there anything else that you guys need to make the market strong? So we came up with 16 recommendations. And one of the recommendations is if you're going to allow, because the Division of Ag has already endorsed and approved over 1,500 types of hemp products, and not all of them are intoxicating, but a lot of them are. And our Division of Ag has said, okay, we're going to allow up to 50 milligrams of THC, so that's half of our legal limit, in hemp gummies, hemp edibles, and not impose an age restriction at all. So somebody could go in, a 15-year-old can go into a smoke shop or go into a clothing shop. I found somebody's at a clothing shop and buy legally these Delta gummies up to 50 milligrams legally. But the thing is, enforcement at Division of Ag is non-existent. So all these shops don't understand, and there's no education about it, that there's a limit and you can legally only sell up to 50 milligrams to literally a child. They're selling 300 milligrams. So I had some of my paralegals go into shops, and you know, my paralegals don't look like kids, but they're not, you know, you should still asked for their ID. When they go to a liquor store, they get asked their ID, and they weren't asked their ID, and they were sold 400 milligram gummy packets, 300 milligram gummy packets, and so on. So it's a problem. You know, there's things that the city can do to address it. There's things we're asking Governor Dunleavy to do to address it. And he just got our report on January 13th, so he hasn't had time, you know, to totally synthesize. But the scary thing, I think, more is about these novel cannabinoids is we have zero research on what these are, and they're not naturally derived. So they're manipulated. They're chemically synthesized and manipulated from the hemp extract, creating these really strong, like way stronger than what we can produce, intoxicating substances. And a lot of them are coming out with these Delta 8 vape pens. I don't know if anybody's familiar with those, but like a lot of kids are getting kind of caught with those in high schools. And there are these vape pens that, you know, coming from India, coming from China, and like there's things that you're not allowed in our state to put in vape pens, acetone, vitamin E acetone, that type of stuff that creates popcorn lung. So that kind of stuff, they're not testing for it, right? Because they're coming from like India and China, and they're flooding our market. And there's only so much, you know, our enforcement can do, Richmond Lane can do, because, you know, your ordinances give them jurisdiction over us, over marijuana guys. And I'm sure if there's something in the code, they could also enforce it. But right now, it hasn't been addressed. It's a kind of a new issue, evolving issue. I've been raising the bell about it for about a year. Now we're finally getting some traction, but it's out. You know, the cat's out of the bag, or dog's out of the gate.
Well, yeah, I, you know, was first became aware of this about, I guess, a month ago. But I didn't realize that you were aware of it that long ago.
I've been complaining to the Marijuana Control Board about this for a year. You know, like slamming my fist down, bringing in examples of these products, and Marijuana Control Board saying, it's complicated. You know, it's complicated. It's a complicated legal analysis, and if the Division of Ag buys off on this 0.3 dry weight basis, I mean, so say I make a sugar cookie, and I weigh it, and it's got X amount of THC in it, say, you know, 300 milligrams of THC, and those 300 milligrams of THC weigh 0.04% of the weight of the cookie. I go, okay, well, that's fine. I can fix that. I'm going to put some frosting on it. I'm going to weigh it again. Oh, now I'm under the 0.03% basis. It's not intoxicating. That's literally the logic that we're dealing with. And they're not taxed, not tested in the same manner, like not even end of product testing. So you will get these products that are Sour Patch Kids sprayed, Sour Patch Kids. Literally, this is a product that's been endorsed by the Division of Ag. Sour Patch Kids sprayed with THC hemp concentrate. And the theory is if you weight that Sour Patch Kid, the sugar and the gelatin would be more weight, you know, the THC on it would be 0.03 or less of the total weight. But I mean, you can see obviously it's a totally intoxicating product. And in marijuana, it's you can't do familiar goods and candies like that for a reason, because kids will eat it.
You said you made 16 suggestions. Where do we find that list of 16?
So I'll have it sent to Mandy. I made copies for you guys this morning, but then I realized I copied the version that I was making my own notes on. So then I left them, but it's also on the AMCO's website too.
Oh, okay, it's on the end.
Yeah, it's publicly out there.
Send it out.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to send it to Mandy, and we send it to the governor's office on the 13th. That was our deadline.
Felix?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So those 16 suggestions, though, were tailored for the state,
That's
I
right.
imagine. Did you have any city-specific suggestions?
So I can come up with city suggestions. One I think is, you know, creating some kind of, like either looping these into your tax, because right now, I have a client right now that was collecting tax on THC from hemp, and then they got audited by the Treasury Department and got in trouble for it because they were collecting tax on a non-marijuana good. But in their minds, it kind of fell into the realm.
Mr. Cross?
The next thing is, since it seems that the target market is minors on this one, with the same effects as, you know, regulated hemp, Has any information been provided to the Anchorage School District? Is there an effort to make sure they're aware of what products to look out for and that this is a growing concern?
So on the marijuana control board, there is a health seat, Liza Muse, and she is part of the effort. I forget the exact name of the entity that she works for, but that is her job to make sure that she educates the school districts on these aspects. And I had a conversation with her. They are aware of it. They are looking at it. They also are inundated with other, from what she told me, other things like fentanyl and whatnot that they're looking out for. So while I understand that it's not the top priority, I do think it's the easiest thing to kind of nix in the butt, because these are things that are coming through into our stores that aren't licensed stores. These are like smoke shops, like clothing stores, XYZ. But there has been an incredible increase in emergency room visits since 2020, which is when these started to kind of rise. It was like something like crazy, like a 2,000% increase. So no, in my head, not enough. I mean, again, I've been extremely upset about this for like a year. So in my head, absolutely no, not enough. But in terms of what their position is kids don't die from marijuana, fentanyl kills people, and that's the theory. But I disagree that that's enough.
Mr. Rivera?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess question to staff. So how do we as a municipality regulate hemp?
I take that one. So this is Brian Yale with the planning department. So for hemp, it just falls under commercial horticulture, under Title 21. I can't speak to other codes, but really there's nothing that prevents somebody from building a greenhouse and growing industrial hemp if they choose to. It depends exactly how it's allowed in each zoning district, whether that's a permitted by right, conditional use, and so on and so forth.
Well, according to state laws, I don't believe we're allowed to import any marijuana products into the state of Alaska. Is that correct?
So they are using this loophole, this 0.3% loophole, to say, like, so if you created a gummy in China from the waste product of industrial hemp, and that gummy weighs, the THC in that gummy weighs less than 0.3% of the total weight of the gummy, they're allowing it in. And so that applies to lower 48s. So most of these products are not being made here in Alaska. The products that are being made here in Alaska are mostly like topicals, the true like pet supplements, those types of things. Most of the products that are actually being brought in are from the lower 48. There's one intoxicating hemp gummy company in Alaska, but they strictly sell only to Alaska licensed marijuana shops. They've made that commitment and they haven't wavered from that commitment. But most of these products are coming from the lower 48 or outside the country.
Well, in the lower 48, some areas that they're growing this stuff out in hundreds of acres
Right,
at a time, and so their cost is minuscule compared to what the growers have to pay up here. If they're renting an old building and electric bill, we know, it's extremely expensive to be in the legal marijuana industry in Alaska.
I mean, it's $3,000 a pound versus $100. That's even high, for the hemp side. I mean, you're getting kilos of distillate for pennies on what we can do.
So we have definitely identified a growing problem, and we have to figure out a way to get ahead of this thing. And the fact that the legislature has just gavelled in it could be good timing if we can get the governor on board with the committee and get some legislation, but it would really need to pass this session.
Yeah, it has to pass a session or I mean, the consequences have already been really damaging, and you could, honestly, like in Eagle River, you could go there, set up a smoke shop, sell these intoxicating products, and be right next to a school or a church or anything. I'm just surprised no one's thought of it. I mean, it's the biggest workaround out there.
Rich?
Hi, this is Rich Fern with Code Enforcement. Through the chairs, are they labeling these products with the THC level? I mean, are they doing
Yeah.
Are they doing us that favor and
They
in
are,
town?
yes,
Okay.
and I should have brought, I have a couple bottles, I was rushed to get out of the office, but it says right on it, 400 milligrams, 300 milligrams of THC. So yes, they are, but they also label it, like, this is a 2018 Farm Bill hemp legal product, which is totally misleading.
Would you either,
Mr. Cross?
I apologize. Do you think you could either send me pictures of
Oh,
those
yeah.
or what that is, and
Yeah.
let me know where those are being sold, so
Mm-hmm.
I know what to keep our eyes out for? I think what I'll probably do until legislation happens is just this is. I don't expect the common individual to get into THC science and how these things are derived from the synthetics, but if we can help our community councils and those individuals know what to look for and what the issues that we're dealing with, we can be proactive about it in our neighborhoods and our communities until legislation or some sort of regulation and how we enforce this takes place. Because it seems to me like the longer it lingers, the more it'll gain traction. So.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and one of our recommendations from the task force is if you're gonna allow these products in the state of Alaska, then they need to be only sold from establishments that are over the age of 21 to enter, and they should only be allowed to be, 21 and up. The problem is that in the hemp bill that got through the Alaska state legislature, for some reason had a specific requirement that an age restriction not be applied. And so that was Senator Hughes's bill, and I just don't think she anticipated this result. I think she was thinking more CBD, kids with epilepsy, that type of thing, not these like incredibly isolated, targeted Delta-9, and then these novel cannabinoids that have come later, products that are being derived from hemp.
Well, when the committee was putting together the rules and regulations for this industry,
I never thought
we
of
didn't
it.
even think of this.
No.
This was not even on the radar. And so, Mr. Sweet,
Yeah, so what's your feeling on how well known this sort of loophole is in the industry? Is it something that maybe there's not a ton of attention, or is it like, if I walked into any random marijuana outlet and mentioned this, they'd be like, oh yeah, we've been doing that for a year.
Well,
something
marijuana
like that.
folks haven't been doing this.
Okay.
So that's the
Or-
thing
sorry.
is marijuana folks haven't been doing this, and they will only sell what's endorsed by the Division of Ag, and most of them kind of are boycotting this whole thing anyways. But right now they should know because we've been discussing it for like a year. I finally was able to get some traction, but the Division of Ag has known about this, from the get-go, and the industrial hemp folks with really strong lobbyists, from states like Kentucky, have known about this, and they were much smarter than us, and we supported the hemp bill because we thought, our sister industry, CBD, we're gonna have a chance, because we weren't even allowed to put CBD in our products unless it was derived from marijuana, up until we had the state program. So we were really supportive of it. We did not understand kind of the monster underneath of, wow, could totally destroy the industry and also have really negative consequences for our community members. I mean, we've gone to every single community council, educating folks, being very forthcoming every year, checking in, and then to have like these products pop up and not have any restrictions at all, not even child-resistant packaging. It's just pretty wild for us. After going through such a regulatory hoops and hurdles, and it's like, wow.
and so, I noticed, I thought there was, that you communicated with Senator Murkowski
Yes.
about this. So were the feds looking to close that loophole in the
So
Farm Bill or
that's
not?
actually what I gave to you here. So what I'll send Mandy is that email that I sent to you that had like 10 attachments, which one of it is a letter to Senator Murkowski, which is our internal memo to her, just because she's on the committee, the federal committee for the reauthorization of the Farm Bill Act. Every 3 years, the Farm Bill Act has to be reauthorized. And so what we want her to do is close this loophole, specifically address this, and specifically prohibit until more scientific research is done these novel cannabinoids that seem, they seem to look a lot like spice. It's changing the molecules, creating really heavy compounds out of a plant that we all thought was really non-intoxicating hemp. So that's one of the attachments. Another attachment that was on the email is the governor's task force. And then another attachment that I think Mr. Cross would be really interested in is a PowerPoint done by one of the experts in the industry. She's been in the industry for 13 years, Pam Epstein out of California. And she really breaks down how much this math is, can create the most concentrated, lethal type of intoxicating products. And we actually had somebody, not in our state thankfully, a 4-year-old died from, it's the first time in history that a person died from THC toxicity from one of these novel cannabinoids. And so that information is in the PowerPoint too. We've never had somebody die from THC toxicity. That's been one of our taglines. Who's died from marijuana? No one. You can't really say that anymore.
Wow.
But again, it's not the licensed folks. This is not the marijuana licensed folks. This is out-of-state companies, kind of.
Oh, and so this hasn't gotten into the convenience stores?
No, it totally has.
It
You can go
has?
to a gas station.
You can walk into a
absolutely.
convenience store and buy this right now?
Absolutely. And you can walk into a convenience store and buy these. You can walk in and get Delta 8 vape pens. And again, no age restrictions. Not even the 21-year-old, you have to be 21-year-old to buy a cigarette. Nothing, because the state hemp bill that passed our legislature said you may not, Division of Ag, you may not impose an age limit. And that's why we need legislation.
Right.
So,
Amazing. Anyone else have additional questions? Mr.
Yeah,
Rivera?
so this is, I think, fairly alarming, and I think worthy of what we have traditionally done in the past, which is sending a resolution from the Assembly to the state legislature encouraging legislation or supporting legislation. So I think it would be great for something like that to be crafted on this issue, because I think this is alarming enough that it warrants it.
I agree. And so, since that was your idea, would you like to have a subcommittee put a resolution together?
I'm not sure we need to create a subcommittee, but yes, I would be happy to work with any interested parties.
I'll help.
Great.
And
Yeah, we need it, through the chair, we need it, I would like to check with legal and see what we can, what we can expeditiously do. That's simple and effective.
Well,
I don't know what that looks like until I chew on it a little bit.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear. So I'm not looking at any local legislation. What I'm looking at is a resolution to the state saying you need to either pass legislation or we endorse state legislation, which I assume hasn't happened just
It
yet.
hasn't happened yet. We dropped the task force on the 13th, and again, there's 16 recommendations in our task force report that not all have to do with it, but a lot of them have to do with taking all cannabis products, whether it's from hemp or marijuana, and treating it like marijuana. Because it is, if it's intoxicating, it's intoxicating. If it's, hemp rope and clothing, fine, that's different. But if it's going to be for human consumption, it needs to be looked at. And also sharing the taxes with.
right, well, yeah, avoiding paying the taxes on this is, and that might have been one of the goals too.
Well, that is completely the goals, because they make the argument, and the IRS has not came and said that anything different, that they are not required to comply with 280E, which is the negative tax implication for marijuana. Also, they avoid all state, all local taxes, so they're not paying any state taxes, and they're not paying any city taxes or borough taxes. They're not paying any taxes at all.
Mr. Cross?
The next advisory task force meeting for the state marijuana control board is actually January 23rd. It's just 4 days away.
So that's the one that I chair. So that's not the
Okay.
marijuana control board, is the advisory task force of the governor. And so we're just coming back to recap on if we hear anything from the governor, and also some additional data that we got from Metric, which is the state tracking system, to talk about tax reform. But I still think it's helpful if anybody wants to join in on that call.
Thank you.
The next marijuana control board is March 8th. I want to say off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I'm just sitting here trying to figure out which committee in the state legislature you would introduce a bill into, might maybe state affairs possibly.
Maybe.
So I'm not sure which committee deals with agricultural products. It actually might be the legal committee might actually be the place to bring this up.
Yeah, or finance, because
Right.
directly.
Because you have the taxes involved, right? Okay. All right, any other questions or comments or ideas about this particular subject? Not seeing any.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenna. The next item on our agenda is the biannual municipal marijuana license idea. And I don't believe Mr. Constant is with us here today. And so this was his idea. Do you have anyone have information about this particular item?
Thank you,
Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not information, but a question. So, is it an accurate understanding that we as a municipality really can't do this on our own without the state also taking commensurate action? Is that an accurate understanding?
That's the way I understand it.
Okay.
There would have to be mutually changed regulations for this to be implemented. And it would be hard to implement it all at once, because everyone's license is not, I guess, well, I don't know. I'm not sure exactly. Jana?
So they renew all at the same time every year, no matter when you got your license. So if you got your license in October, you're still renewing in June. You got your license in May, you're still renewing in June. One of the recommendations of the advisory task force is to change a language in the statute that says annual renewal registrations, to not say annual, to say biannually. So that's one of the task force's recommendations to change in statute.
All right.
And code enforcement also came to give kind of enforcement side of it, and they have some information.
Hi, this is Rich Fern again. We would recommend that if we do that, and we do support going to the biannual inspections, that we split out the licensees. So say a licensee that has their license number has an odd number, they get inspected on odd years, and then if they have an even number on even years. Because the way the code is written now, everybody comes due in June, and last year we did 127 licensing inspections. So they're all due at the same time, so that kind of overloads our shop, at one time for the marijuana licensing, and unfortunately that's our busiest time of the year with our normal enforcement activities. So 127 actually comes in about 7 or 8% of our total service requests per year. So it's really a big chunk out of our time right at one time. So we would definitely wish for the licensees to be split up even odd years.
Fantastic. Mr. Rivera?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a sort of forward question. So I assume that eventually, hopefully the state will pass legislation that allows for the biannual, and then we will do so afterward. When we craft such legislation, will we need to provide provisions that specify that, or is that something that the department can do on its own? So if we just say biannual, you can decide on your own how that looks as long as it matches the biannual requirement.
I think that would need to be codified.
Okay.
All right. All right, thanks. Any other discussion or questions about biannual marijuana licensing? Suggestions?
Well, I would just like to thank code enforcement for actually doing the inspections and getting the city, and Mandy for getting the city renewal licenses out. I mean, my clients are still waiting for the state to issue licenses. They're been, even for my liquor clients, they've been expired for a while now, and they just get a letter that says, we'll extend it. And so, yeah, thank you guys for your hard work and making that happen. Because it messes up my clients' operations, because they have to prove to Weed Maps and their point of sale systems that they're licensed. And if they don't have valid licenses, it messes it up.
So,
So,
all right.
thank you.
All right, thanks. Well, so do you think the state board just isn't meeting often enough? Is that the situation?
It's not the board, it's just the staff. It's just they need more staff. You can see these big issues that are overwhelming. They need more staff. They need to be more efficient. The system needs to be more efficient. I mean, it's still paper submission for like a lot of folks. There's no online submission system. I know that they're working on that, but I mean, it's just, I don't pretend to, I've never worked in government, so I don't know. But it's just really inefficient. Really, really inefficient.
No, okay, well, we can move down the agenda to new business. And the only item under new business is community council realignment. And wondering, is there someone in the planning department that's working on that?
Okay, thank you. Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm Tom Davis, Municipal Planning Department, and here to provide a brief update and answer any questions that you have about the project.
Okay, great, thank you. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The municipalities initiated a 10-year review of community council district boundaries. We had the mosaic of community councils. There's about 38 in the municipality. We are required by code to review community council boundaries and necessary as a municipality adjust them to update them so that they continue to reflect the actual natural neighborhood communities and to ensure that each resident, property owner, and business has representation by an active, engaged community council for their area. They are really important. And Mandy's flashed for you the project webpage. If you were to direct your constituents to that, have them read white paper number 1. That would provide you and them with plenty of information about the project. But just briefly, what this is, what the Assembly's role is, and what the process is, so that when you receive recommendations, you know that it's gone through a good consultation process and there's support for what you receive. Just briefly, the Assembly's role is the decision maker, and at the end of the day, the Assembly will take a look at the recommendations, and there will be an ordinance. The community councils are listed, and the maps are burned right into the municipal code. And so when we change a boundary, we amend that by ordinance. We go through this every 10 years, but occasionally there's some one-offs, the most recently being last 10 years, there was a parcel that the Assembly approved adding to Government Hill Community Council. Mid-Hillside and Lower Hillside Community Councils married and merged by agreement, and so those are recent examples. The process is basically starts with the municipal planning department having responsibility for first collecting comments, and secondly, the second step in the process is that Andy, would you mind clicking on under documents for review, white paper number 1? There's just a brief flow chart. I'm not going to ask you to read it, but the basic graph down below there you are, the Assembly. That's the gold and black. Basically, this thing's baked up in 3 steps. If you were to squint your eyes at that chart, you'd see 3 basic squares. We're still in the top square. We're identifying potential study areas. We began in November by sending out, thanks to the Community Council Center, online interactive questionnaire to their 10,000 member Community Council list. We reached out to officials and a few others. And we're just sifting through those now. We've had about 250 responses and about 24 study areas that people have asked us to look at. Either they're saying this community council is not active, we need to do something about it, or maybe there's a neighborhood or subdivision and people are asking, why is it, in this community council shouldn't be naturally fit in together. So those numbers kind of tell you that for the most part, people are happy with their community council boundaries. We made adjustments in the past 10, 20 years, and so we just have these 24 individual boundary segment study areas that people have asked us to look at. That was enough for us to request to stand up a boundary advisory committee. It'll be made up of a geographically representative group of 5 to 10 community council officers or active members who will help planning staff thankfully suss through these and apply the code-based criteria for how we decide as a community where the boundary should be. This white paper includes those. You can also find those in the AMC 2.40, those criteria. What do we look at when we're trying to figure out community council? So that boundary advisory committee will help us get to the second square. And that's where the planning department releases a report with recommendations. And here are the study areas folks asked to look at. Here's what the boundary criteria suggest to us to do about those. Many of those recommendations, I imagine, will be no action. Steady as she goes. Some of them, I believe, will recommend some adjustments or that there be something done about an issue. That will go out for more than 2 months of public review before it even gets to the Planning and Zoning Commission, because we're in the Community Council's wheelhouse here. So we're going to be asking them to vote on resolutions, and that takes time. It'll take them a couple months to talk about it and then vote on their resolutions. We support this, we do not, don't do this, what have not. And the Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing and will be all ears for what the community councils say. So they will, as almost like a rezoning process, the commission will provide a set of recommendations. You will probably each have heard from the community councils, and all that information will be provided to the assembly. And I think that by the time it gets to the assembly, we'll hopefully sussed out the difficult challenges. If in the event, historically, when Midtown Community Council was recommended to be created, the assembly received an ordinance with a bunch of other community council adjustments recommended, expand North Star, this or that. But then separately received, the assembly at the time received a resolution, an accompanying resolution. That resolution had to do with Midtown. This is in 2003. He said, we really believe there should be a Midtown Community Council. That was a recommendation at the time. So we need to form this community council. We don't really have anybody that's actually active in such a community council. So this resolution is the assembly identifying where the boundaries would be and indicating support. And eventually that group came forward and eventually Midtown was created. But I think most likely we receive basically a report, draft ordinance. If you like maps, you'll like it because there'll be maps. So thank you for the opportunity, and I can try to answer questions or requests.
So is the deadline for the survey already gone by, or are there still people fill out the survey?
It's still active. It's still online. This isn't like a zoning case or something where it's a hard deadline. I think within a week or so, we'll be working on moving past the point of collecting information and trying to, bring a report forward. But it's still there, and I'm not. If someone has a comment, I don't think we're going to tell them no at this point. But I think within the several weeks we're going to be moving on, and I'll have to pull the questionnaire.
So you'd like to get the comments in by the end of the month?
That's a good
Okay.
that would be a good deadline.
Mr. Cross?
Yeah, so I imagine most of those areas that will have something chime in will be those areas affected by redistricting that took place last year. Would be my hypothesis. Has the Federation of Community Councils already taken their own initiative, have their own meeting to discuss this amongst themselves before they present suggestions?
The Federation at this point is just watching what we're doing, and the white paper we flashed in front of you lays out the criteria for how we review these adjustments. And the code is primarily about establishing real neighborhood communities. And so these are really like actual natural geographic neighborhoods. And so, for example, if reapportionment of a political, a legislative boundary happens to split a community council or neighborhood in half, we're not likely to, respond to that. But all other things being equal, if a neighborhood or subdivision, is fine shifting over to another community council in order to align with school district boundary or even a political boundary, then that's a consideration.
Okay. All right. And so you're hoping to get this done by this summer or before the end of this year, or what's?
Yeah, this is definitely a this year thing. We would like to get it done by summer. Although there are only 24 boundary study areas that have been identified, that was about 4 times more than we anticipated. So we're trying to stand up our boundary committee and suss through those as quickly as possible. We don't intend to put a lot of the process during the summer when, of course, the community councils aren't able to comment.
Well, so have you gotten comments from the community councils themselves at this point?
We reached out to the community councils, sent a letter, including the question, also the questionnaire, reported to the Federation in October. We've received, I'd say, about maybe 6 or less than 6 community council boards have actually come forward. We didn't encourage any voted on, approved, full-on resolutions yet. We suggested they keep their powder dry for, if any boundary study comes forward, then we'd have the full community council help them, ask them to provide resolutions. So we've had comments from about 6 community councils, hey, we're fine, or no, we're not fine, and we've received a few letters.
Well, I know it was, they discussed it at the Russian Jack Community Council here a couple of weeks ago, and of course they all thought their boundaries were just perfect. And so sometimes it seemed like they were looking at other community councils and saying, yeah, we're perfect, but those guys, they might need to be changed. I thought that was a little interesting. But anyway, well, thank you for that introduction. Any additional questions about community council realignment? Not seeing any. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Well, we're down toward the bottom of our agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to do participation? It's 3 minutes. Ms. Grant.
Hi everyone, I'm Melinda Gant from Anchorage Community Development Authority. Mike Robbins, the Executive Director, asked if I could report on a couple of our projects that we're working on.
Great.
So I did have some flyers, maybe that would help with a visual.
Sure.
And I know
Manny
it's
can
a
help
little
pass
bit
those
of
out.
my 3-minute time. This might help. If you could get to this first. That would be helpful. And I would have brought more, I wasn't sure, and next time I'll bring up a visual, so maybe that might be easier for everyone.
Thank you.
But I'm gonna just kind of really do some highlights of what's happening in our world and what we're focused on, and it's just topics that Mike wanted to bring forward to you all. We do have a lot of other things in the hopper, but specifically, we are very focused on Block 102. Block 102, for those that are not aware, is between D and E Street and 6th and 9th Avenue. It's a parking lot. It's owned by Alaska Housing, or the state of Alaska. We recently approached the state, about maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and we sought their approval for a land trade. That land trade would include an HLB property, which is next to, close to the Anchorage Police Department. It's a public land. It's not being used. It's got trees around it and all that good stuff. And the idea is that we're going to be doing a trade for the HLB property for this parking lot in downtown Anchorage. Our big focus is what we want to develop, and we all know the word housing is very important to everybody, so that for us is going to be a big, huge deal if we can get this project going. We have a lot of movement forward right now. We've got a draft ordinance that we're working on. We're working with the legal department to see how, what this deal looks like, but right now we do have full approval from the state of Alaska to do this land trade. We're working very closely with HLB. We got approval from our Downtown Community Council and from the Campbell Creek Park Community Council that was impacted by the HLB trade. Everyone supports it because it's just a win-win for the city. We also have been in communication with the state of Alaska because we're moving their parking people. Parking always becomes a hot topic. Why are you taking our parking away? So they actually have parking just about half a block away, which is the Lenny Pachillo parking garage, and that is under capacity. So they have plenty of room to bring in those DOT parkers into their own parking slots. So the idea was, the big focus was, how do we turn downtown parking lots into redevelopment? And so that's our number one project that we're really focused on. The other one is the Mount McKinley building, which is on 4th Avenue, across the street from the police department, in between, I think next is a Gaslight Bar, I believe, and another space. I can't recall off the top of my head. But for those that are looking at it, there's a visual. We ended up doing a concept study. This was brought to our attention by Chris Constant. He asked us to look at a commercial space that's being underutilized that potentially could be reconverted into housing. We thought that was a brilliant idea, and we moved forward with it. And so we went ahead and developed a concept study to create micro units for a commercial space that's just not getting rented out in downtown. There's a lot of changes right now that's happening in the commercial market. Less people are renting out commercial spaces, and we know that we need more housing. So the idea is that we're going to be converting this complex into micro units with the first floor, and you can see it conceptually. The first floor on that next page is more for workers. And the folks that probably will go in this will be workers, maybe workers that work next to the Gaslight Lounge or in the bottom space. So we hope to get an RFP out for this and work with the owner and getting it out so that potentially it could get developed into this wonderful space. And more than likely, we're looking at about end of first quarter or beginning of second quarter. And then lastly, Midtown Plan and Rockdale Grant kind of go hand in hand. So Midtown Plan, we had received a $100,000 grant to evaluate a bid for Midtown. And so I had applied for ARPA funding and applied for a community plan for $300,000 for Midtown because we knew they don't have a community plan. They needed one if we were going to look at and evaluate a business improvement district. So we're working hand in hand with the planning department right now. We've got an arrangement with them that we're going to issue out the RFP. We're going to seek out a community planner to get this going. We hope to have the plan done by this year for the community. They're very excited about it, and we're going to utilize not only the $100,000 for part of the business improvement district questions and seeing where they land with all the studies that we're looking for, but also and take that search and envelop it into the community plan because we know we need that information for our community plan. We're really excited about it, and this is our step for ACDA that we see our future working very closely with the planning department because we want to follow all the community plans that have been adopted by the city, and we're moving forward with that. Brownfield grant. So ACDA had done quite a few brownfield grants through the city. We were able to, as a partner, do quite a few of our properties. One point was Block 96, the Debenham project. Everybody knows about the 48 unit that's in construction right now. We were able to use brownfield grant money to do some cleanup and evaluation. Well, we applied for another brownfield grant through the planning department, and we hope to hear news by either March or April. I believe it's either a $1 or $2 million. I believe it's a $1 or $2 million brownfield grant. EPA has already contacted us and said that they feel like we're a great candidate because the city and us have shown positive steps using the money for development projects. So we're really excited about it. We hope that we get this award because we already know we have some future projects that we want to use the money for. Our community partners also that are on it is Eklutna, and I believe, Tom, do you know? It's a housing nonprofit. For the life of me, I can't remember who it is, but we have a coalition. It's called the Brownfield Coalition. So it's the planning department, ACDA,
Cooking with housing?
No, it's not neighborhood. It might be NeighborWorks. Yeah, it might be NeighborWorks. So we're working with everybody because everybody's very focused on housing and cleaning up and getting things back on the tax roll. So that's our big focus. And I think that's it. I've got a lot more, but I think I've eaten up a lot of my 3-minute time, so thank you for your patience.
Well, thank you for bringing this information, and I think the land trade seems to me like a really good idea. And how many units is the plan? Have you come up with that?
So are you talking about for the McKinley building or Block 102?
Block 102.
I believe we're looking at about 156 units to be in there because everything is a little smaller, of course. But once we get closer to the plans, we'll have a number drilled in.
As I recall, that's like a little less than 2 acres or something.
It's almost a city block. So
really?
if you look at that diagram, there's blocks of it, but there's 2 little spaces that are not, and that's private property, and we are currently working with that private owner to see if they can be a part of the project.
Oh, okay. All right. Fantastic. Any questions about this project? Or these projects, I should say?
Yes.
Mr. Cross.
Yeah, the Kinley building, looking at the plans here, those are mostly efficiencies. Are those intended to be sold as condos, long-term rentals, short-term rentals? What's the end use?
Yeah, I don't have the answer for that, but we will have the answer for everyone through the RFP process.
Right.
So the idea is that we'll issue out an RFP. Folks will, put their bids in or proposals in, and then we'll have a better idea of what the proposals look like.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So what is the square footage for some of these smaller efficiencies?
Oh, I knew you were going to start asking me the details.
It's
Son
small.
of a business. They're tiny. So if you go to the 3rd page, and bear with me, this is not my project. I'm trying my best here. So if you go to the 3rd page, there's the square footage that's noted. You have unit type 1, which is 250 square feet, and unit type 3, which is 230 square feet. So what we call those is micro units.
Micro units.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I live in an 800 square foot condo, so like 250 square feet and less. Wow.
So it's so funny you said that. I actually love them. In fact, every month we put up a new display. Our directors do in our office, and so this month's display is all about micro units. Jim Weingartner posted that because he's really into the idea of micro units in Anchorage. And it's happening United States wide, and it does support workforce housing. So I'm actually pretty excited about it. I know if I was a single person working at a younger age, this would really appeal to me.
And so these units are, if they condo them out, it's first-time home buyers would be the target audience? Or?
I'm not sure how the developer would do that, whether or not it would be a condo for own or condo for rent, not sure.
I would anticipate, I have some real estate, some short-term rentals downtown, but a majority of my tenants are actually doctors, attorneys, individuals who come in for 8 weeks, 3 months or whatever, and then in the interim, those month and a half gaps, normally they come in. But I mean, so if the rental units, I imagine you get professionals that are looking for a place, they're here for a short period, and then, you know, the nice thing about the short-term rentals, you can fill those gaps in between till you get another long-term person in there. But there's a real shortage of workplace housing for individuals who are just here for 6 to 8 months. You know, if you're familiar with what's been happening in the medical industry, the number of traveling nurses has increased exponentially, and that's happening in a lot of fields. A lot of our employers are having to pull people from out of state. I have corrections officers that are working for the state that are actually working shift work, so like 6 on, 2 off, and they're staying in housing. We can provide furnished housing, so there's a real need for it. A lot of people think short-term rentals, they think vacation, but mostly it's workplace housing because we have an employee shortage.
Right. Well, I know we've been recruiting nurses that traveled up here for, you know, the last couple, probably 2.5 years at this point. So, well, all right, well, thank you very much. Appreciate that information, and that's good work you're doing. Anything that's going to increase housing at this point is a win.
100%. Thank you.
So great. Okay. So, we have anyone online that might be interested in audience participation, Mandy? If there's anyone that's calling in or that's here that would like to comment, you have 3 minutes, and if you're on the phone, to unmute, it's *6, I believe. Well, not hearing from anyone, I guess I'll take a motion for adjournment.
Adjourn.
We are adjourned.